Hi golfers, Nick here from Untitled Golf. It's Friday, so welcome to another lesson on golf tips. This week on golf tips, I'm going to share with you some amazing progress, probably one of the biggest transformations I've had with any of my students. In today's video, we're going to take a look at this golfer on the screen here, how I took him from pretty much a complete beginner using the stack and tilt system to be able to play some amazing golf on the golf course. So in this video, I'm going to go through the key things to help this golfer play better golf. First up here, golfers, we're going to take a look at this golfer's original golf swing and I'm going to talk you through the process that we did using the stack and tilt system here at GOLFTEC. Now, the first thing we always do here is evaluate the golfer. We go through how we measure the golf swing using the motion, we go through the club data as well. Now, in this first particular lesson, we're going to have a quick breakdown here of this golfer's swing. So this golfer suffered with contact like most you do, tended to slice the golf ball. This is kind of big things that I see day in, day out, in here in the Bay and around the world with golfers' golf swings, is the golfers tend to slice, they tend to struggle with contact. So this golfer in his swing, if we break this down, his feet were too square at setup, he tended to sway a lot in the backswing, lift his head up, his arms were very high. As he came into the ball, his weight was back and the arms were bending as he hit through. So if I try and replicate that, as he went back, arms were really high, weight was back, and you could see there turning to kind of top or thin or slice the golf ball. So my swing there was 5 degrees out to in, the contact was right on the bottom, as you can see on the screen there. So that was kind of typical shot that this golfer was hitting. So how do we get him from doing that to then hitting the ball out the middle, swinging into out and doing that consistently? Well, it takes time. And the first thing that we kind of address, so when you're looking at working on your golf swing, first of all, you need to make sure the setup's good. So as we set up here, I've got the golfer to kind of turn his feet out. Now, the first lesson, we worked a lot on the body sway, and this is hugely important, right? If your tendency is to slice, generally your weight's going to be back. And in this particular golfer's case, he moved his weight a lot and lifted his head up in the backswing. Now, this is very common. If you tend to sway off the golf ball and keep your weight back, your tendency is always going to be to swing from out to in, right? If you swing the most away from the target and then swing down, the club's always going to come outside to in into the golf ball. Now, the best golfers, they swing the club on a plane. So as I set up here, my club is angled to the ground. As I swing, my club should swing on this angle around my body. These are what the lines are for. It talks about these a lot, the grid lines. We have a line there for the club, a line for the hands. Hands and club should follow those lines and then back through in the finish. Well, that's where we want to get to. So this first lesson here, I'm going to bring up his swing so you can see what we did. You can see that I'm holding the club on his head. So really trying to give this golfer the feeling for his head movement, which is crucial. You've got to keep that head stable as you go back. The other instruction I gave this golfer was to keep his arms straight. So this first lesson was to keep his head stable. We've got to try and make sure the hips don't sway, but the main thing really for this golfer was really to try and keep the head stable and keep the arms straight. And if you can do that, there's more chance of hitting the middle of the face, right? I didn't hit up very hard that shot, and that's kind of a good way to start. If you're struggling with your contact, sometimes you just want to just step by step work on it. So you can see the contact there is bang out the middle. So much easier to hit the middle if you don't move around and you don't bend your arms. So the instructions for this golfer, obviously I was holding his head, trying to give him the feel. Now, the feeling you have to get, if you're one of those golfers that sways off the golf ball, you've got to try and counteract that move. So many golfers think they're keeping the head stable and it's not. It's moving up, it's moving away from the target. And that's the first step of the golfer swinging out to in and struggling with their low point control, which is obviously a key fundamental in playing good golf. So this golfer, the feeling was, as he went back, was to move his shoulder down and move his head towards the target. Now, in reality, we don't want the golfer to do that. We want that golfer to stay very centered as they go back. We don't want that golfer to move left, or we don't want them to move right in their backswing. We want that golfer to stay very centered. So for this golfer though, because he moved so much away and up from the target in the backswing, he had to feel that he kind of counteracted that. So this is a good way to practice. So we held his head in the lesson, but also I would get him to make a swing and move his head down and to the left, keep his arms straight, keep his arms straight. So we didn't really hit very hard here. We're just really trying to do the opposite. So I'm really exaggerating this, as you can see on the video, but ultimately in reality, we don't want that head to really move at all, and we don't want those arms to bend. So the first lesson was really mostly focused on head movement and arms, right? You've got to keep the body weight on the left side, don't move it to the right, and you've got to keep those arms straight. That's crucial if you're going to have any sort of control where the club hits the ground and where you hit it on the club face. The next step for this golfer was to work on his swing plane. So I don't know if you've seen the Tour Striker plane station, I use this a lot. It's got different angled holes there to put the alignment sticks in, and we use noodles, and as you can see on the video here, this is what I was using in this particular lesson. If you need to get hold of one of those, I'll put a link in the description below, but if you don't have one of those, you can use a noodle and just lay it down. You can use a head cover, anything really that's not going to damage the golf club. Now the idea of using a noodle here is I'm angling this noodle kind of on the swing arc, bent it slightly, just gives us a kind of a guide for the club head, because this is something that's crucial. If you're going to improve your golf, you've got to learn how to swing this club on plane, and this was the next step for this golfer. Once we controlled his head movement, his arms, he needed to start to learn how to swing the club on plane. So this particular golfer actually has a plane station. He uses it in practice, and this is one of the reasons why this golfer was able to really improve his swing, was by using the plane station in the bay in practice to be able to improve his swing. So just angle it kind of just behind the ball, angled kind of with the swing arc, and it's a great way to practice. So if you can't get hold of a plane station, which really is the best way to practice, this is the next best thing. As we talked about before, we've got to move those hands and club inwards around the body. So the next step was really to start to build up from what we did with the head, what we did with the arms, and start to move the hands and the club more around the body. So as we take a look at this golfer swing, you'll see the difference here in his arm position. Like I said, the first thing was to control the sway. The next step was really to learn how to swing this club on the correct angle. As we progress through the lessons, this is something we still work on, it's something he still practices. But ultimately the feel for him was to, as he went back here, once he controlled his sway, was to really move his left arm as low as he could. Right, if you're one of those golfers that has their arm above their shoulder plane at the top, then you really need to exaggerate that movement going back. And I can't stress how important this is when you're working on your swing, to really exaggerate things. Right, this golfer felt like he was moving the arm low enough to begin with, but once we put the plane station there, you could really see how far he had to move his left arm around his body, and for him, it really felt like he was moving his arm across his belt. So if you do lift your arms in the golf swing, you do swing out to in, you have to move those hands inwards as much as you can, and by keeping the weight forward, that's keeping the hips forward, keeping the head stable, and moving the hands in. That's going to make it much easier for you to start to move this club inwards around the body and keep it on plane. So if you can't use a plane station, use a head cover, a towel, something just to guide your swing path, because it's really going to help. But ultimately, you have to exaggerate it. If you can video yourself, that's also going to help, but really exaggerate. Try and get that left arm as low as you can across your shoulders if you struggle with an outswing swing path. As we progressed through the lessons, we kept either a noodle on the ground or we kept the plane station there for him to really keep an eye on this swing path. Now, from the front view, this was the kind of the next step really here to work on his swing, was to really focus on what happens in the follow through. If you're one of those golfers that slices and moves the weight back, those two things are linked, right? The more you keep your weight back, the more that swing path is going to move out to in. We tied up his backswing, we kept his arms straight, and now we're starting to swing on plane. The next step was how to move his weight through into the finish. So when we practiced this, first thing we did was really, and a lot of the time that when we work on the swing, is not to really go full out, really just work on some drills. So from his drill was to push his hips forward, keep his arms straight as much as he can, and stop where his arms are parallel. You can see there when I'm swinging, I'm stopping at arms parallel. Okay, I'm making sure I push my hips forward, I'm making sure I tilt my right shoulder down. This is crucial to keep the club on plane. As I swing down here, as I tilt my right shoulder down and push my hips, that keeps that club moving on the correct plane. Okay, it's one thing making sure the arm doesn't lift in the backswing and across the line of shoulders, but then you have to then make sure you tilt the shoulder and push the hips forward. So a good drill for this is to not go all the way through and just practice swinging to arms parallel. If you can stop here arms straight, hips forward, right shoulder down. This is a good way to train it, and it's a good way to practice for sure. It helps you tidy up your body movements and control them a lot better. So as we worked on this, so the feel was arm low, tilt left, backswing. I'm exaggerating this, by the way. Tilt left, hands in, hips forward, arms straight, tilt the shoulder, okay? They were his key feels for his swing, right? You have to exaggerate this as much as you can. Tilt, hands in, hips forward, okay? So this was the kind of the key pieces that we put together. So we're starting to control his weight, starting to control his tilting, starting to control his hand path, starting to control his arms and his hips into the finish. Now, what we're gonna do now is take a look at his last swing from last week, and I was really impressed with this, right? This is his last swing that we're gonna take a look at now, and I think he's made an amazing transformation, right? We took away the noodle, and in this lesson, when he started, he was about 1 or 2 degrees out to in, which is an amazing progress really, from about 7 or 8 degrees out to in when we started at day 1. So now we're making better contact, but this golfer was still a little bit out to in. So like I mentioned earlier, we had to really exaggerate that left arm, right? And this is key. Everything you do when you change your swing, you have to exaggerate it, right? When you're practicing, right, it doesn't really matter if you hit a good or bad shot when you practice. What you're trying to do is work on these movements, and I couldn't stress this enough with golfers that I work here in the Bay, is not really to worry about where the shot goes, but really just exaggerate the movements, right? We're trying to do something different here. If you have a tendency of doing things in your swing, especially if you play golf for a long time, you have to really exaggerate it. So really impressed with his last swing. So we're putting these pieces together now. Feet turned out, weight forward, hands forward, shoulder down, hands in, arms straight as he went through, and you can see we're starting to get that swing on plane and getting it a couple of degrees from in to out. Finally, golfers, I just want to say thank you to Alan for letting me share that lesson. I know it helps so many golfers from around the world kind of put these pieces together in their swing. I'd also like to say thanks to Alan for the hard work he's put in. He's really worked hard at this. He has a plane station, he works at the range a lot, works on these drills, and that's why he gets the results. It doesn't happen overnight. You've got to stick to it. You've got to have a system, and you've got to stick to it. You've got to be disciplined, and you've got to work hard. If you do that, you'll get the results like this golfer. So just to summarize, golfers, the key things that we always go back to are the 10 words of the stack and tilt system, which is weight forward, which is what Alan struggled to do. He struggled to keep his weight forward as he swung. He also struggled to move his shoulder down and move his hands in. And he also struggled to keep his arms straight because his weight was back, and he struggled to get his hips tucked under his shoulders in the finish. So a lot of these lessons, they link back to these 10 words. Weight forward, shoulder down, hands in, arms straight, hips tucked. If you can do those 10 words as a basic template, it's going to help you play better golf. So thanks for watching, golfers. If you did enjoy the video, please give it a thumbs up, and I'll see you again next week for another video.